to end the season, we're going to learn about green burial, which I'm really glad about because it's something I've been interested in for a long time. And I hope, obviously, you are too. And I found Joan through Google.
Yeah.
And there's a Green Burial, Massachusetts, which I know you'll tell us about.
I will.
And she's on the board. She's the treasurer. And that's really all I know. You're going to have to say more, how you got interested and things like that. And thank you, Joan, for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeanette and Green Hudson, for inviting Green Burial, Massachusetts. And I'm a representative of Green Burial, Massachusetts. Green Burial, Massachusetts is a nonprofit. We're all volunteer. We don't have any brick and mortar office. We're not in Boston someplace. We have a board. Most of us live in Western Mass, but we have, our president actually lives in Everett, so we're all over the state. We are looking for land to create a conservation green cemetery, which is a little harder to do in New England than you would think because of the soils. You really have to have diggable soils. And we do lots of public presentations. I've worked with many towns and helped them to create green options in their town. And just information presentations like this one. So, and we do maintain a website, which is quite good, we think, and lots of resources. And we have a telephone line that is not live answered, but we'll call you back if you call us. And we also have email if you have questions or would like to ask for a presentation there. So this is quickly what we're going to talk about tonight. And I do have lots of slides, so I'm going to kind of go through it quickly, and then hopefully you can remember your questions and ask at the end. So a little bit of historic perspective. Used to be that all burials were green. Before the Civil War, we were agricultural communities, and when our family members died, somebody washed and dressed the body, someone made the coffin, someone dug the grave, and it was green. And everything that went into the ground was probably biodegradable because they didn't have polyester back then. So that's the home parlor. And then around the time of the Civil War, of course, the soldiers, the families of the soldiers wanted them to be brought home. So they had to think about how they were going to do that. So that's when embalming, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then around the 1930s, Mr. Hasse decided that we could keep our dead bodies preserved forever. We put them in a concrete box with a hermetically sealed seal, anyway, for the top and the bottom. And that was when the vault started coming in. And then, of course, the garden cemetery movement came followed right behind that. And that is when the beautiful cemeteries were mowed, and they had to have the concrete boxes so that their heavy equipment didn't fall into the grave. And then in 1998, of course, the first conservation cemetery was started it's called Ramsey Creek in South Carolina. And Billy and Kim Campbell started that. So, as I said before, the battleground is where they started embalming, and at that point they used arsenic because they couldn't be sending the dead bodies home on the train without some sort of preservative. So the funeral industry said, oh, we'll help take care of it. And by then, the parlors were small. I mean, everybody lived in apartments. The Industrial Revolution was starting. And so the funeral industry had a good segue into taking care of our dead. So it's really, we allowed them to care for our dead. So we kind of gave that job over, but we used to do it ourselves. And then, of course, when Lincoln was transported by train from Washington to his home state, he needed to be embalmed for that long a trip because that gave Americans a chance to look at him. So that's kind of when embalming became kind of in vogue, I think. So this is a comparison of the conventional cemetery, and I use the word conventional cemetery rather than traditional because I think of traditional as how our grandmothers and fathers did on the farm and perhaps buried us in the apple orchard. And if you notice there's lots of upright stones and there's some flat stones as well, but in the way back you might see a couple of piles of dirt, and that's the dirt that's been removed in order to make room for the concrete box and the coffin, or the casket. On the right-hand side is an example of a green cemetery. And in my town, we have Green Cemetery in Gill. And this is Green Springs in near Ithaca, New York. And they mound their graves, and as we do too. So the body's placed in the ground, either in a cardboard box or a pine coffin or a shroud or a wicker basket, whatever. And then nothing is removed. The dirt is just mounded over, and then it subsides as the ground settles. So why would you choose to have a green burial? This is a question that a lot of people ask. And some people just have always done have always lived ecologically. I've always recycled. I've always tried not to use a lot of plastics and tried to think about my carbon footprint. So it's the environmental impact that I'm concerned about, as many of my colleagues are. So that's kind of, and now we're all thinking about that. I mean, now it's becoming a crisis. It is a crisis, really. And we do need to think about it. And I never thought about what we put in the ground. But if you have ever seen an open grave, there's this large concrete box, and then there's a casket, which could be made with heavy gauge metal, or it could be made with precious wood coming from somewhere in South America. So anyway, that's a difference that we're trying to change, perhaps. So other reasons might be personal reasons or religious reasons, and cost is sometimes you can, if you do it all yourself, which not everybody does or everybody wants to do, but you can save a little bit of money doing it yourself. And it gives the family an opportunity to participate in the ritual, which we've kind of lost as we've given this care of our dead over to the funeral industry. So what is green burial? Well, basically green burial is very simple. Everything that goes into the ground is biodegradable. It's a good idea if you're purchasing containers that they be locally sourced, because you're spending a lot of carbon to bring things from Europe or whatever. Sometimes the shrouds come from Europe. It also encourages family participation, and it's helpful to have sound management, environmentally sound techniques. So as I said, these are some of the examples of some of the containers that are available. A pine box. I actually have a pine box in my exercise room. I made it myself with some direction from a fellow in Maine, Chuck Lakin. He ran a coffin making workshop at our church, and so that was very nice. And there's a place in Montague that Mary Jane Fraser, who makes wicker coffins and cardboard boxes. They need a little stabilization. And then, of course, the shroud. It's what people have been wrapped in forever. It can be a sheet, it can be a quilt, it can be made, it can have straps attached to it. It can have a pocket for a shroud board. I mean, there's all kinds of shrouds available on the market. So, what would you see in a green burial ground? You probably will not see, you may see markers, you may see flat markers, you may see no markers, or you may see community markers where they would have a section and all the names of the people that are in that section would be on that list. And I'll show you some pictures of that in a little while. So it's not 6 feet under, it's 3 to 4 feet to the top of the, to the bottom of the grave, and everything, it's backfilled. And I often tell my contractors to put the topsoil in first, and so that helps with the decomposition. And the density is also not so heavy as you see in a conventional cemetery as well. Conventional cemeteries, this is what you're going to see, right? You're going to see the metal coffin, casket. I guess they call it a casket because casket means precious. Something is precious. And so there's heavy gauge metal, there's precious woods, and then in the bottom there's a list of all the, a lineup of all the boxes or vaults. And then they can just open them and use them and cover them up. So as I said, I never knew what goes in the ground. I never knew about all of this vault. And this is the lowering device. So the lowering device lowers the vault into the ground, and then the casket or the coffin is put on those top straps, and then the box cover is, and then the whole thing is lowered into the ground. And on the other side, there's a natural cemetery prep. So the grave is dug. Some graves are dug by hand, but mostly a mini backhoe is used, and the shovels there on the mound can be there for to invite folks in the family to cover the grave if they'd like to, or part of it. And the straps are for lowering, or you can use a mini lowering device if pallbearers are not available. So these are the 3 types of green cemeteries certified by the Green Burial Council. The Green Burial Council is our national organization. We don't pay dues to it. It's just that they do a lot of research and they have a lot of information to back up green burials with science. And so there's hybrid cemeteries, there's natural cemeteries, and there's conservation cemeteries. And I'm going to explain each one. So a hybrid cemetery, like Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, is kind of the iconic cemetery, the garden cemetery, and this is a hybrid cemetery because they have green burials in with their conventional burials. And probably some of their old burials were green before the days of embalming and concrete boxes. So they are able to find spaces to bury folks in a green way. And the slide on the picture on the right is actually a lawn. It's called a lawn, and it's a couple of folks are buried there, and then there's the multiple names on the stone on the right. And this is a copy of the database that we have on our website, Green Burial, Massachusetts, and we have many of the cemeteries listed, and and some of the cemeteries are green. We don't have them all, so if anyone's interested in being a volunteer with us, we do call cemeteries, call towns, and ask them about if they offer green burial, or if they don't, and so that's a way to become part of our organization. And if you're going to manipulate this database, I recommend you go to the very bottom right as a place to enlarge it, and it makes it a lot easier to find what you're looking for. You know, it's an Airtable device. So natural burial ground, as I said, the Green Springs in Ithaca was the first green burial ground that I ever visited way back in 2009. And it was on a farm, and the farmer sold the acreage. It was more than 100 acres, I believe. And so they have different sections. They have a Gentile section and a Jewish section, and they have a cremation section, and so they have a lot of area to bury, and it's very beautiful. And it's all open. When we've toured, I don't know if this is still their mission, but they were, when the cemetery is filled, they're just going to let it grow up to trees. They mow the field once a year, I think. And on the right is Cedarbrook Cemetery, and this is where my husband was buried 10 years ago. We couldn't find a green cemetery when he needed one, so Cedarbrook burial ground is in Leamington, Maine. It's west of Portland. It's about 2.5 hours from me, but it was worth the ride. And it was a wonderful experience for my family and I. And conservation burial grounds, and that's what Ramsey Creek is and what Billy and Kim Campbell started in the 1998. And with a conservation burial ground, they usually work in partnership with a land trust, so that there's the land trust cares for the conservation part of it, and then the cemetery organization, like Green Burial Massachusetts wants to be a cemetery organization, would be operating the cemetery part. And it would all be done in a conservation way, so that the ground would, the dirt and the earth would be cared for. And so Lee Webster, who's used to be president of Green Burial Council, she actually said that it's possible to sequester 25 pounds of carbon in a conservation cemetery, which I was astounded. Seems like wonderful. And this is the Green Burial Massachusetts project. We are looking for land, and it's taking a long time to find land, because it's rocky. It's either too rocky, doesn't have good access, or too wet, or something prevents us from actually opening our green cemetery. But that's what our goal is. So if you were planning to do a green burial or have a green burial, it might take a while to get this organized, because if your town doesn't offer it, you've got to figure out where else you could be buried, or you could perhaps talk to your town about giving the town members a green burial option. So, and you may want to do most of the caring of your loved one by yourself, kind of a DIY. Thank you. Situation. Or you may want to use a death doula or an end-of-life funeral guide, or you may want to use a funeral director for some or parts or all of the arrangements. So it's all up to you, and it all depends on how much you're going to pay. And we can't talk about burial and COVID without talking about concerns a lot of people had during the COVID. But actually, it's felt that when the person dies, so do most organisms. There are still some that don't die, and we need to take precautions. I'm a nurse, and so my rule is if it's wet and it's not mine, I protect myself. So I wear gloves and if necessary, mask, but not always. A lot of people ask about cost. It depends on what you choose, and where you are will certainly affect the cost. And what you buy for furniture that you're going to put in the ground. So that's like the coffin or the casket or the vault. Cemetery fees, these are something that are a given. And I did list the cemetery fees in Hudson. I found them on the website, so that over there on the table with some of the information. So you can, in the metropolitan area, most single lots are about $1,000. And then you have to add on the perpetual care fees, and also there's the opening and closing fees, and it depends on whether it's summer or winter. So, I mean, we all have those. I manage a cemetery in Gill, and our green cemetery lots are $1,000. So, and then there's the opening and closing fees as well, because we hire a contractor to do that. We don't do it ourselves. So this slide kind of gives you a little summary of the costs of other ways of end-of-life care. So there's cremation. Immediate burial is really what you were looking for. If you're looking at a price list from a funeral director, you want to look at immediate burial, and that's going to be what they're going to charge you for green burial. Some funeral homes now are having a separate distinction for green burial, but it depends on. So anyway, but it's a good idea to ask. You're saving money though by not having the embalming, by not having the outer container, the vault, and you may choose a modest container or shroud. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is not green burial, okay? So we'll talk about fire cremation. For the cremation, the torch needs to be heated to 2,000 degrees for 90 minutes. That's a lot of fossil fuel energy going up the smokestack, as well as other things going up the smokestack, like mercury in our teeth, and smokestacks are not necessarily filtered, so that's probably not a good idea. And then at the end, the bones do not burn, and so they are pulverized, and that's what you get as ash, which is not really ash at all. It's ground up bone salts, which are not good for sustaining any vegetation. In fact, anything that you put with cremation remains would not live, so it has to be amended. So then come along, it's not legal in Massachusetts yet, but it is proposed, and they're not sure it's going to pass this year, but alkaline hydrolysis, it is legal in some 29 states, it says, and so it's a liquid that liquefied. It takes a while. It takes 2 or 3 hours for the soft tissues to be liquefied with again, you get bones at the end, similar to the flame cremation. And then, I don't know if you've ever read very much about natural organic reduction. That's what it is human composting, and that's been proposed as an option in the state legislature, but we're not sure that that's going to pass this year, as I said. It goes together. So first of all, the person would have to be transported to a facility, and right now there's nothing except in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. So there you go, a lot of carbon there. So the vessel for the decomposition is a box, and it has wood chips, alfalfa, and the body, and it is the humidity and oxygen are controlled, so you have good aeration, and turning happens too. So it takes 8 to 12 weeks for the decomposition to happen. All right, so a little bit about Hudson. So I came a little bit early to your beautiful town, and I did drive through Forestdale Cemetery. It was gorgeous. It's huge. I'm used to little postage stamp cemeteries. I have 5 cemeteries in Gill. So the Cemetery Commission in Hudson has 3 members, and I think they're appointed by the select board. I don't know, I couldn't quite tell, but there are some bylaws over on the table and some rules and regulations. I didn't print all of those out, so if you're interested in looking at that. It was no mention of green burial. So if that's something you're interested in, then I would recommend that you talk to these folks, or Eric Ryder is the Director of Public Works, and that's who manages the cemetery. And there's the rates. That's just a real quick summation, but there's more rates over there on that table. So if you cannot find a green burial and you need one, what could you do? You might choose to avoid embalming. That would be your first step. You don't have, embalming is not a law. You don't have to do that. Most funeral directors require it if you're going to have a viewing. So that's when it's required. But other than that, you don't have to. You could choose a coffin that is biodegradable, soft woods. Pine is good, or some other softwood. And you could ask to have I've never heard of this happening, but you could ask to have the box inverted. If you ever find out that somebody is going to let you do that, well, let me know, because
What does that mean, the box inverted?
the vault, instead of being open at the closed at the bottom and open at the top, the coffin would be put in the ground first, and then the vault would be put on top of it, so that the coffin would actually touch the ground
Some cemeteries will allow it for certain religious denominations.
Especially, yeah, the
Like
Jewish,
Muslim and Jewish,
right.
they will allow the inversion of
Mhm.
the outer burial.
Yeah, and the Jewish cemeteries
Yeah.
they have mostly, not very much, but in the bottom and
Yeah.
lots of holes so that there
Mhm.
can be.
Right,
Yeah, but they still want to mow their lawns, so they still have the vaults.
yeah.
What timeframes are we talking about after someone passes away?
That's why I had that slide that talked that line across, because this could take years. It could, if you wanted to start from scratch.
You could start before
We
you're
have
dead,
to
though.
plan ahead here.
You have to plan ahead.
At this moment.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, there are green cemeteries around that take folks that don't have a resident requirement. Yeah, like Sharon, and there's one on the Cape I know of, and then of course there's Cedar Brook up in Maine, in Leamington, Maine, and Rhode Island. There's
Amherst has.
and Amherst, and lots of the towns where we're from. This is kind of my favorite handout, and I can email the handouts. I will email them to Jeanette.
You're gonna email me all your slides, I hope.
Yes, and then you will
Yeah.
have the handouts. So I have our brochure, which is trifold. I have this resource page, which has lots of wonderful websites, and the book that started me on this journey, Grave Matters by Mark Harris. That was really I did not know what went in the ground when I was starting this whole thing. I was astounded. And then there's another page that has resources on it, and then there's what can you do if you can't find a green cemetery. That's the fourth. So there's only 4. So let's continue with questions, because I bet you have because I did go through that very rapidly.
You did,
I
great.
did.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So this is how you can contact us. As I said, we have an email, info@greenburialmassachusetts.org, or this is our telephone number, and we do call back within 24 hours. So, and our website. And if you know about land, and you would like to have it reserved as a conservation burial ground, that is an option. We would love to talk with you about, perhaps.
What is the biggest stumbling block that we're gonna find when we approach, God forbid, Eric Ryder about starting a green burial,
Perhaps lack of knowledge, because,
lack of knowledge?
yeah, I think that people, once they're educated, think, oh my gosh, this is so much, it makes so much sense. But when you think about, ooh, touching a dead person, or not putting them in a vault, or things like that, it's, that's something that's,
Well, I guess in Massachusetts, we gotta get it passed, the law passed first, right?
no, it's legal, no, it's legal.
We
No,
allow green burials, but not
abs-
composting.
Right.
Oh, right, the composting part, yeah, that's,
Different.
and that's gonna be a long way out, because
Yeah,
then it's maybe passed, but then you have to have the businesses start
Yeah.
up that are,
Didn't your slide say that composting and the alkaline hydrolysis are not considered green?
they're not, no.
Composting's not green?
Only because of all of the carbon that's required for bringing the materials to the facility and bringing the person to the facility, and the amount of energy is used to create this environment so there can be rapid decomposition of the body. So it's
Okay.
really not green. The greenest is simply putting a person in the ground to decompose and naturally. And everything else that goes into the ground, and conventional cemeteries are very toxic. I would not want to dig up a cemetery plot and, who knows what you'd find. But the dirt is very good at stabilizing any organisms and keeping things from,
Do the green cemeteries cause sinkholes, or what is the occupancy trade-off from a conventional to a natural?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Would
understand.
you be able to bury more in a conservation cemetery?
No, not as, the number is, the density is a little less. Can be, in a hybrid cemetery, it can be up to 1,000 per acre. In a conservation cemetery, 300 to 400 per acre.
Wow.
And my cemetery is in the woods, and so I know I'm not gonna get 300 in an acre. But, no, I think about, I'll be lucky if I can bury 150.
So then that would, going back to the question about Hudson cemeteries, that would be then another consideration, that you would have to allocate a larger amount of space for the number of bodies that you would be putting
Right.
in there.
You're not gonna be putting them 3.5 feet apart.
Right.
You might put them 5 feet apart.
So it's really that, and then the issue around maintenance in terms of, it's not going to be a level, it isn't going to be a golf course.
Right, so it might be mowed once a year or something like that. Or some cemeteries have paths, and they also may plant natural flowers that.
Native plants.
Native plants, right. I have a whole list on our cemetery of native plants that can be brought to can be used on graves.
Do you own the cemetery?
No,
Do you
no, no.
own mine? No?
No, it's not, I shouldn't say mine, but I'm so I didn't really introduce all of the things that I do. So I am a nurse, as I said. I've joined Funeral Consumers Alliance of Western Mass in 2009, and Green Burial at that time was a part of that. And so then Green Burial broke off, so I belong to Funeral Consumers Alliance of Western Mass plus Green Burial Massachusetts, and I'm treasurer for both those organizations. And then, because we didn't have a green cemetery in Gill, I thought, well, and we always said this on our brochure, if you want to change the cemetery, you got to join the cemetery commission. So I did. And so I am chair of the cemetery commission in Gill, and Liz is on the cemetery commission in her town as well, right?
And I joined that for that same reason. I was interested in green burial, and then I found myself on the cemetery commission. And I thought it would take me 2 or 3 years to persuade those guys, because they're both, the other commissioners, very conservative people. And as soon as I described what it was, they said, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." Like,
That's why I said,
what?
yeah.
So, and then you make up your rules.
Are there some recommended starting points for bylaws? You make up the rules, but you
Well,
gotta
there are-
start somewhere. Do you start from scratch?
No, we hope not, because
Okay.
there are examples all around, and green cemeteries are really good at sharing. I mean, I got my bylaws or my regulations from Warwick, Mass, which is a green cemetery. It was a old historic cemetery that decided they wanted to call themselves green as well, so they allowed green burials.
I mean, the main, we don't have it's not bylaws, it's just regulations.
Yeah.
And, which is a completely different animal. You don't have to go to town meeting about this.
Or to the state. You have to send
Yeah.
your bylaws into the state.
The real rules are simple. No vault, no embalming, everything biodegradable.
Yeah.
4 feet deep hole instead of a 6 foot deep hole. That's all. That makes you green.
Yeah. And then you can get into whether you're going to have markers or not, so you can say that in your rules and regulations.
So
But
so
it-
where
but
did I
you-
miss that needs more space? Did I miss the beginning talk?
No.
Why does that require more space?
Well, because you don't have a vault that defines where the grave is. I mean, you do have markers. We mark 4 corners of the grave. But nobody wants to be digging up someone else's spot.
Yep.
So that you do need a little bit of room. You don't need a lot, but you do need a little bit.
Okay, I get it.
And you also want allow for some room for the ground to decompose person.
So
yeah.
you had said like the conservation grounds, depending on the land, are about 300 to 400 per acre, where hybrids are closer to 1,000 per acre. Where are you falling in somewhere in the middle for natural burial grounds, or how does that compare?
You could, it depends on your
Geography.
yeah, your geography, like as I said, I have.
Right, in the woods, you're
In the
not
woods,
gonna
I,
get-
yeah, I can't, and I have to be very careful around trees. Do you have a cemetery with trees in it?
The green cemetery.
Yeah, green cemetery isn't, no,
No,
no.
it's just a.
So I can't be doing, so we bury we choose, the cemetery commission chooses where the next plot's gonna be open.
Yeah,
And we do it sequentially, more or less. But we
Right.
also don't wanna be doing more than one around a tree for many years.
yeah.
Because we need to give that tree a chance to recover. So when
Right.
they open the grave, they cut the tree root clean, and then the root will grow its auxiliary roots.
Wow.
But it takes a while.
Right,
So you certainly don't want to be damaging trees in the woods. Anyway,
no.
that's what.
Are some of the cemeteries businesses, private businesses?
Yes, the West Leiden Cemetery is private. Well, Wildwood is private. I don't know if and the one in Sharon is private, I do know that. And the one on the Cape, something Port. No, Falmouth Port.
What does it mean to be private?
It means that they have to be incorporated. In order to have, in the state of Massachusetts, in order to be a cemetery, you have to be incorporated. And so you have to go through all of that, and then you just write your regulations, and you have to follow Chapter 114, which is the Massachusetts law that governs cemeteries, which doesn't tell us, it doesn't restrict us a lot. It gives us guidelines, and mostly governance guidelines.
In Massachusetts or elsewhere, can you bury on private property? Is that allowed, or do you have to be in a cemetery?
You don't have, I mean, you have to create a cemetery of your own.
You have to call it a cemetery or incorporate it as a
Yes,
cemetery.
yeah, that's been being discussed by the Massachusetts Health Organization, right as we speak practically. One of our representatives went and spoke with them. And they are very excited about green burial, but also they are recommending that the boards of health in each town, it's the Board of Health that regulates the cemeteries, as well as the select board. And so the person who has land, who wants to have a cemetery on their land, you can do that. It has to be designated, and it has to go on your deed so that it will be always designated for perpetuity. And you have to get it inspected, and then you have to go through the DEP, and so there's quite a procedure for getting that, but it is possible.
Okay, I don't have any such land.
No,
was
I
just
know,
curious,
but
just
yeah,
curious.
yeah, it is possible.
Right.
Thank you for your attention.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.